Welcome back to Super English Talks. I'm Sarah, and today we're going to have a very honest and important conversation. It's about something that every single person on this planet has experienced, no matter how young or old, no matter where they live, no matter how successful they seem to be. That thing is making mistakes. Yes, mistakes. We all make them. I've made them. You've made them. The people you admire the most have made them. The difference between those who grow from their mistakes and those who get stuck in them often comes down to one thing: how we choose to respond when they happen. You see, many of us have been taught, often without realizing it, that mistakes are bad, that there's something to hide, something to be ashamed of, something to pretend never happened. But the truth is, mistakes are not just part of life, they are a vital part of learning. If we never made mistakes, we'd never grow. We'd never improve. We'd never discover better ways of doing things. I want you to think about the first time you learned to ride a bicycle, or to swim, or to cook something in the kitchen. Did you get it perfect on the first try? Probably not. Maybe you fell off the bike. Maybe you swallowed some water. Maybe you burned the food. And yet, each of those mistakes taught you something. Falling off the bike taught you about balance. Swallowing water taught you to keep your head up. Burning the food taught you to watch the heat. Without those moments, you might never have mastered the skill. But here's the challenge. While we can easily accept small mistakes in learning a physical skill, we often struggle much more with mistakes in other areas of life, like relationships, work, or personal decisions. Why is that? Maybe it's because those mistakes can feel heavier. They might affect other people. They might carry real consequences. And when that happens, our instinct is often to criticize ourselves harshly, to replay the mistake over and over in our minds, and to label ourselves as failures. But that's where I want to stop you. Because here's the truth: making a mistake doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. And every human, even the wisest, even the most successful, has a long list of mistakes behind them. Now, let's talk about the first step in learning. From a mistake acknowledgement. You can't learn from something you refuse to admit happened. Sometimes we try to justify it, blame others, or ignore it. But the only way forward is through honesty. Saying to yourself, yes, I made this mistake. It happened. I own it. That moment of honesty is powerful. It's like turning on a light in a dark room. You can finally see what's really there. Once you've acknowledged it, the next step is analysis. I'm not talking about beating yourself up or obsessing over every detail. I mean calmly and honestly asking, what happened here? Why did it happen? Was it because of a lack of information? A bad decision in the moment? Was I tired? stressed, distracted? Finding the root cause is important because otherwise, you might repeat the same mistake without even realizing it. I remember a time in my own life when I missed an important deadline for a project. At first, I was angry at myself. I thought, Sarah, you're so careless. But when I actually analyzed what happened, I realized it wasn't carelessness. I had taken on too many commitments at once, thinking I could handle them all. I wasn't realistic about my time. That awareness taught me to be more mindful about saying yes to everything. And you know what? Since then, I've become much better at managing my schedule. This is what happens when you approach mistakes with curiosity instead of judgment. Curiosity asks, what can I learn from this? Judgment says, I'm a terrible person for doing this. One closes the door. The other opens it. And I want to say something important. Here, learning from mistakes also requires self-compassion. That means treating yourself with the same kindness you'd give to a friend. If your friend came to you and said, I made this big mistake, would you yell at them and tell them they're worthless? Probably not. You'd listen. You'd empathize, and you'd encourage them to make it right. You deserve that same kindness from yourself. I want to share a little story about a young man named Daniel. Daniel was passionate about starting his own business. He had an idea. He worked hard. He took risks. But his first business failed. He lost money. He felt embarrassed, and for a while, he didn't want to talk to anyone about it. But slowly, he began to reflect. He realized he had rushed into launching the business without really studying the market. He hadn't asked for advice from experienced people. He also learned that his pricing strategy wasn't sustainable. It was painful to face those truths, but by doing so, he prepared himself for his next venture. 2 years later, he started a new business, this time with better planning, advice, and strategy. That business succeeded. And Daniel will tell you today that his first failure was actually his most valuable teacher. The truth is, most people who succeed at something big have a history of mistakes and setbacks behind them. The authors whose books you love, many of them had manuscripts rejected multiple times. The athletes you admire, they've lost matches, missed goals, and made errors under pressure. The innovators you respect, they've built prototypes that didn't work, ideas that failed, and products no one wanted until they learned enough to create the right one. This is why it's important to see mistakes as stepping stones, not roadblocks. A stepping stone helps you move forward, even if the step is a little awkward or shaky. A roadblock, on the other hand, stops you in your tracks. The way you label your mistake determines whether it becomes a stepping stone or a roadblock. But here's the tricky part. How do you keep a mistake from feeling like a roadblock? One of the best ways is to shift your focus from what went wrong to what can I do next? Because the moment you start thinking about the next action you can take, you're already moving forward. Let's imagine you made a mistake at work that disappointed your boss. You could spend hours replaying the mistake in your head, feeling worse and worse. Or you could think, okay, I can't undo what happened, but I can send an apology. I can offer to fix the problem, and I can double-check my work next time. That's action. That's forward motion. And forward motion breaks the feeling of being stuck. Another key to learning from mistakes is resilience, the ability to recover from setbacks. Resilience doesn't mean you never feel upset. It means you allow yourself to feel the disappointment, but you don't stay in it forever. You stand back up. You try again. Every time you do, you build strength for the next challenge. One way to build resilience is to remind yourself of times you've bounced back before. Think about a time you thought you'd never get past something, and yet here you are. That memory is proof that you can survive difficult moments and even grow from them. I also want to talk about the importance of openness to feedback. Sometimes we make mistakes because we can't see our blind spots. And the only way to see them is for someone else to point them out. It's not always easy to hear criticism, but if it's given in good faith, it can be a gift. I've learned some of my most valuable lessons from people who cared enough to tell me what I was doing wrong. And you know what? First, I didn't always want to hear it. My pride got in the way. But with time, I realized that those moments of discomfort were exactly what I needed to grow. There's also an emotional side to all of this. Mistakes can bring feelings of shame, guilt, frustration, or even anger. It's important to acknowledge those feelings without letting them control you. You can say, yes, I feel disappointed in myself right now. But you can also remind yourself, this feeling is temporary. It's not the whole story. Sometimes it helps to reframe the story you tell yourself about the mistake. Instead of saying I failed, you can say I learned. Instead of saying I'm not good at this, you can say I'm still learning how to do this well. The language we use matters. It shapes how we see ourselves and how we act in the future. And here's something I think every listener should remember. Nobody's keeping a perfect record of your mistakes except you. The truth is, most people are too focused on their own lives to remember all the little errors you've made. We tend to hold on to our mistakes much longer than other people do. So sometimes the only person who needs to forgive you is you. You know, one of the most fascinating things about mistakes is that they're often the best evidence that you're actually trying. Think about it. If you never make mistakes, it probably means you're staying in your comfort zone, doing only what you already know. And while that feels safe, it's not where growth happens. Growth lives in the uncomfortable space where you're experimenting, risking, and yes, sometimes failing.
I like to think of it like this. Life is a bit like learning to ride a bicycle. The first time you get on, you wobble. Maybe you fall. Maybe you scrape your knee. But those wobbles and scrapes are proof that you're learning balance. Q. Never felt unsteady. It would mean you were never really riding in the first place. You'd still have training wheels on. Mistakes are the moments when the training wheels come off and you're learning to navigate without guarantees. Now, I'm not saying mistakes are fun. I'm not saying you should want them to happen. But when they do happen and they will, you have a choice. You can treat them as final verdicts. Or you can treat them as temporary teachers. One ends your story, the other moves your story forward. I remember reading about a woman named Sophia, a painter who spent months working on a large canvas for an art exhibition. A week before the event, she accidentally spilled an entire cup of coffee across the painting. At first, she was devastated. Months of work, ruined in seconds. But then, she noticed something interesting. The coffee stains had created these organic, abstract patterns that actually added depth and texture to the painting. Instead of trying to cover them, she leaned into it, using the stains as part of the final design. The piece ended up being her most talked about work at the exhibition. That story stays with me because it's such a powerful reminder. Sometimes mistakes don't just teach you. They transform what you thought was a disaster into something unexpectedly better. Of course, not every mistake turns into a masterpiece, but every mistake has the potential to change the way you see the situation. And sometimes, that's the real gift. Another important part of learning from mistakes is separating the event from your identity. What do I mean by that? Well, it's easy to say, I made a mistake, therefore, I'm a failure. But that's not true. A mistake is something you did, not something you are. When you confuse the two, you start carrying a weight that doesn't belong to you. You stop seeing the mistake as a moment in time, and you start seeing it as a permanent label. That makes it much harder to recover. Here's a mindset shift I find really helpful. Instead of saying, I failed, try saying, I learned one way that didn't work. It's such a small change in words, but it's a big change in meaning. Suddenly, the focus moves from self-judgment to curiosity. And curiosity is a much more productive state of mind than shame. Speaking of curiosity, let's talk about one of the most valuable tools you can use after a mistake: asking better questions. Most people's first reaction to a mistake is, why did I do that? Or what's wrong with me? But those questions don't lead anywhere helpful. They just make you feel worse. Instead, try questions like, what could I do differently? Next time, what did I miss that I need to pay attention to? Who can I learn from in this situation? They point you toward solutions instead of spiraling you into self-criticism. Let's take an example. Imagine you were late to an important meeting and it hurt your professional reputation. You could sit there saying, "I'm so irresponsible," over and over, but that won't change anything. Or you could ask, "What can I put in place to make sure I arrive early next time?" Maybe you realize you need to set an earlier alarm. Prepare your materials the night before or leave a buffer for unexpected delays. Those are actions you can take changes that will prevent the same mistake in the future. And here's the thing. Learning from mistakes is less about perfection and more about direction. If you can use each mistake to point yourself toward a slightly better version of yourself, you're winning. Now, let's address something that often gets overlooked: the emotional aftermath. When you make a mistake, your brain often replays it in high definition. Cute. You remember every detail, every awkward word, every uncomfortable feeling. This can be exhausting. One way to break that cycle is to deliberately shift your focus. Remind yourself of times you've succeeded. Surround yourself with people who see your potential, not just your errors. Give your mind a balanced picture, so it doesn't get stuck zoomed in on one bad moment. There's also huge value in self-compassion. Self-compassion means treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a friend in the same situation. If your best friend came to you and said, "I made a big mistake," you probably wouldn't say, "Wow, you're hopeless." You'd say something like, "It happens. What did you learn? How can you move forward?" So why not offer yourself that same grace? In fact, studies have shown that people who practice self-compassion are more likely to take responsibility for their mistakes and improve afterward. Why? Because they're not wasting energy beating themselves up. They're using that energy to make constructive changes. I also want to touch on the importance of patience in this process. Some mistakes take time to fully process. You might not see the lesson right away, and that's fine. Sometimes, the meaning reveals itself only after you've had some distance from the event. I can think of mistakes I made years ago that I only recently understood. Time has a way of offering clarity that the heat of the moment can't dot. So if you're in the middle of dealing with a mistake right now, hey, and you're feeling lost, know this: it's okay not to have all the answers yet. The important thing is to stay open, keep reflecting, and keep moving forward even if the steps are small. They can leave you feeling embarrassed, frustrated, or even defeated. But here's something I've learned over the years: that sting you feel after a mistake, that's actually proof that you care. If you didn't care, it wouldn't bother you. So instead of seeing that discomfort as a purely negative thing, try seeing it as a signal. A signal that you value the work, the relationship, the opportunity that you want to do better next time. I remember once making a huge mistake during a presentation early in my career. I was nervous, speaking too fast, and at one point, I completely blanked on an important statistic. It wasn't just a small pause, it was several seconds of silence with my audience waiting. My face felt hot, my hands shook, and in my mind, the moment lasted forever. That night, I went home thinking, "I'm terrible at public speaking. I can't do this." But after a few days, once my emotions calmed, I started to ask myself, what went wrong? What can I do differently? The answer was simple. I hadn't practiced enough with my notes. I had relied on my memory instead of having a clear structure in front of me. So the next time, I rehearsed twice as much, made bullet points for every slide, and gave myself breathing space between sentences. The result? My second presentation went smoothly, and I even got compliments from colleagues. That mistake, embarrassing as it was, ended up being the reason I improved so much. You see? In the moment, mistakes often feel like the end, but in reality, they can be the beginning of something better. They can be the very thing that forces you to break old habits and adopt better ones. Now, one question people often ask me is, Sarah, how do I know if I've truly learned from a mistake? The answer is in your behavior. If the same situation happens again and you respond differently, more thoughtfully, more prepared, that's a sign you've learned. It's not about never facing similar challenges again. It's about meeting them with new tools and better judgment. Another important aspect is owning your mistakes. This can be tough because it requires vulnerability. But when you admit a mistake honestly, without making excuses, you gain trust. People respect those who can acknowledge their errors and work to fix them. It's a sign of maturity and integrity. Think about the leaders you admire most. Chances are, they're not the ones who claim they're always right. They're the ones who say, I made the wrong call there, and here's how I'm going to make it right. Owning up to your mistakes doesn't make you weak. It makes you credible. But let's talk about the other side for a moment. What happens when you don't learn from mistakes? Life tends to give you the same test again and again until you pass it. If you keep ignoring the lesson, the problem often repeats itself, sometimes in bigger ways. For example, if you repeatedly miss deadlines but never change your time management approach, the consequences will keep stacking up. Lost opportunities, strained relationships, and stress.
That's why reflection is so important. After any mistake, take a little time to process what happened. Ask yourself, what exactly went wrong? What part was under my control? What part was outside my control? What will I do differently next time? Writing these answers down can make them more concrete. Your brain processes information differently when you put it into words on paper. Plus, you can look back later and see how far you've come. Now, I know some people say, but Sarah, what if I keep making mistakes even after I've learned the lesson? My answer is welcome to being human. You can know what you should do, but sometimes you'll slip. The key is not to give up after a setback. Progress is rarely a straight line. It's usually a messy, sagging path forward. Let's take language learning as an example, since many of you listening are here to improve your English. When you're learning a new language, you make mistakes all the time, mispronouncing words, using the wrong tense, forgetting vocabulary. If you tried to avoid all mistakes, you'd never open your mouth to speak. But every time you correct yourself, you get better. In fact, language teachers will tell you that students who make and correct a lot of mistakes often learn faster than those who stay silent out of fear. So here's a thought. What if we treated mistakes like gym workouts? In the gym, when you lift a weight and your muscles feel tired or sore, that's actually a sign they're growing stronger. Similarly, when you make a mistake and feel that mental discomfort, it means your brain is being stretched and challenged. It's building new mental muscles. This brings me to resilience. Resilience isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about recovering from them quickly and constructively. It's about saying, yes, this happened. Yes, it's uncomfortable. But I'm going to take something from this and keep moving. Okay? One way to build resilience is by practicing micro recoveries, small moments when you bounce back in daily life. For example, maybe you send an email with a small error. Instead of panicking, you calmly send a correction. Or maybe you forget an appointment. Instead of hiding from the person, you apologize sincerely and reschedule. These small recoveries train you for bigger challenges. Also, remember that mistakes are easier to handle when you keep perspective. Ask yourself, will this matter in a year? Often, the answer is no. We tend to magnify the importance of mistakes in the moment, but time has a way of shrinking them. Here's another tool I like: reframing. Reframing means changing the way you look at a situation. Instead of thinking, I failed, you can think, I learned something valuable. Instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, you can say, I'm still learning. Words shape our mindset, and mindset shapes our actions. I want to share one last story here. There's a Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired using gold, silver, or platinum to fill the cracks. Instead of hiding the damage, the repair makes the object more beautiful and unique. That's how I see mistakes. They're not flaws to hide, but experiences that can add value to who you are. If you repair the cracks with wisdom, resilience, and growth, you become stronger and more interesting than if you'd never been tested at all. So, here's my challenge to you. The next time you make a mistake, catch yourself before you spiral into self-criticism. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself what this moment is here to teach you. Then take one small action that moves you forward. Do that enough times, and you'll start to see mistakes not as roadblocks, but as stepping stones. The hidden benefits of making mistakes. So, what are some of the benefits of making mistakes? Well, think of it this way: every mistake is a chance to learn, to gain more knowledge, and even to develop new skills. As they say, experience is the best teacher, even if it's from messing up. The more mistakes we make, the more experience we get. Of course, we don't want to keep making the same ones. Each one has a lesson. It's like a loop. You make a mistake. You figure out what went wrong. You learn, and then you do it differently next time. This learning cycle helps us get better in every part of life. This reminds me of how important it is to have a growth mindset. If we see our mistakes as huge failures, we avoid risks later because we get scared. Fear of making mistakes can really hold you back. But if we can change our view and see them as chances to grow, it changes everything. When we're not afraid to mess up, we try new things, step outside our comfort zone, and we can achieve more. Even incredibly successful people have spoken about the importance of learning from mistakes. Walt Disney famously said, "The way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it." Oprah Winfrey said, "Learn from every mistake because every experience, encounter, and particularly your mistakes are there to teach you and force you into being more of who you are." These are great examples of how successful people embrace mistakes. I think Albert Hubbard said it best. The greatest mistake you can make in life is to be continually fearing you will make one. That fear stops us from doing so much. It keeps us from taking chances, putting ourselves out there, and reaching our potential. How to learn from your mistakes. A step-by-step guide. Admitting a mistake is only the first step. To truly learn from our missteps, we need a process. We need to go deep and ask ourselves the right questions to figure out what went wrong and find O's lessons. 1. Acknowledge and analyze. The first step is to simply admit the mistake without letting it define you. Then you need to analyze it. Ask yourself, what was I trying to do? What went wrong? When did things start going off track? And why did it go wrong? By answering these questions honestly, we start to see the root cause and where we need to change our approach. 2. Seek feedback. Sometimes getting other people's thoughts can be incredibly helpful. Fresh set of eyes from a boss, a coworker, a mentor, or a friend can see things we miss. Constructive feedback helps us see things from different angles, which gives us even better insights. 3. Find the lesson. Every mistake has a hidden insight in it, and our job is to find it. Ask yourself, what did I learn from this? Maybe it's a new skill, a better understanding of something, or a lesson about your strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes a mistake shows us a problem we didn't even know we had. By seeing our blind spots, we can fix them and not make the same mistake again. Turning stumbles into stepping stones. 4. Create an action plan. It's not enough to just think about the lesson. We need to put it into practice.
We have to turn those lessons into actions that help us avoid making the same mistake again.
This might mean making new habits, changing our strategies, or getting some training to fill in our knowledge gaps. The more specific and actionable our plan is, the more likely we are to actually do it. Point 5. Share your experience by sharing what we went through and what we figured out. We can help others avoid the same problems and learn from our experiences. This is called paying it forward, and it also helps us understand our own experience even better. When we're open about our mistakes, it gives others permission to do the same. And it helps create a culture of learning and continuous improvement. 6. Practice self-compassion. This is so important. Making mistakes can be tough on the ego, and it's easy to be hard on ourselves when we mess up. But it's crucial to remember that we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes. It's about learning to forgive ourselves, embrace our imperfections, and keep going with a positive attitude. This is about building a healthy mindset that sees mistakes as opportunities for growth, not as setbacks.
Building a learning mindset for a lifetime's we continue on this journey. I want to talk about building a learning mindset. This means changing how we see things. Instead of seeing challenges as threats to our ego, we see them as chances to grow. It means knowing that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's about being curious, asking questions, and being open to different ways of thinking. A learning mindset helps us see setbacks as temporary and focus on what they can teach us. When we go through life with a willingness to learn from everything, it opens up so many possibilities. It lets us keep evolving, adapting, and growing, and gives us the power to achieve more in every part of our lives. And don't forget the importance of having mentors and a support system. Whether it's a mentor, a coach, a supportive friend, or a professional network, having people in our corner can help us deal with the challenges of learning and growing. They can give us valuable insights, encouragement when we're down, and help us stay focused on our goals. Building a learning mindset and finding that support are ongoing things, but they are absolutely worth the effort. So, as we wrap up, my final thought is this: how will you turn your next mistake into a chance to grow? What systems or strategies can you use to help you learn? Remember, growth doesn't happen instantly. It's a constant process of learning, adapting, and changing. Be kind to yourselves, embrace those mistakes, and keep trying to be your best self. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into learning from mistakes. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Super English Talks. Until next time, happy learning, everyone!